I never thought a simple walk to the neighborhood park would end with my disabled daughter staring down the barrel of a loaded handgun, all because of her wheelchair. It was a sunny afternoon, one of those rare, peaceful days when the breeze felt like comfort and the world seemed to pause just long enough for joy to sneak in. My daughter, Emily, had begged to visit the swings, her favorite spot. She's only 8, born with a spinal condition that confined her to a customized wheelchair. It has bright-colored LED lights, a small tray table, and a few motorized features for her independence, something she's deeply proud of. We left the house with smiles. We didn't know we were walking into a war zone. As we neared the park, I let Emily wheel herself ahead. She liked the feeling of being in charge. I followed at a distance, watching her in that carefree, innocent state, her ponytail swaying, giggling at the breeze hitting her face. That's when I saw her, Karen. Everyone knew her. Her lawn was always trimmed to military precision. She never missed an HOA meeting, and she treated the neighborhood rules like scripture. But this time, something in her eyes was different. She wasn't just nosy. She looked disturbed. She was already halfway across the park lawn, stomping toward Emily. At first, I thought she might just yell about the wheelchair being too noisy again. But then she pulled it out, a black handgun, right there in public in broad daylight, and pointed it straight at my daughter. "Don't move. Don't touch that thing. Step away from it," she screamed. I sprinted. Emily froze. She didn't understand what was happening. She just stared, eyes wide and confused like a deer caught in headlights. Except this time, the headlights were a trembling pistol in the hands of a neighbor gone mad. "She's a terrorist." Karen shouted. "That's a bomb. I know what I saw online. They disguise them like this. What the hell are you doing?" I yelled, skidding across the grass toward them. "She's a child. That's my daughter." Emily began to cry, sharp, short gasps. Her little fingers gripped the armrest of her chair. "Daddy, what's happening?" "Stay calm, baby. I'm right here." People started gathering. A couple on a bench stood up. A woman holding a stroller pulled out her phone. Someone called 911. One man approached slowly, trying to talk Karen down. But her hands shook violently and the gun didn't lower. She was locked in her delusion, convinced my daughter's wheelchair was an improvised explosive. My chest pounded. I didn't care anymore. I moved in front of my daughter and spread my arms. "If you shoot me. But you're not touching her." I could see the realization starting to flicker across her face. Just a flicker. But before anything else could happen, sirens. Police cars screeched up the road. Officers jumped out, guns raised, first at Karen, then at me. For a split second, we were all frozen in a triangle of tension, my daughter sobbing behind me, a woman clutching a gun, and a group of armed strangers shouting orders. And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't just about a gun, or a Karen, or a rule-breaking HOA policy. It was about how fear, ignorance, and unchecked power can turn a child's mobility aid into a weapon in someone else's twisted imagination. Freeze frame. Let me take you back to how this all began. 2 weeks before that horrifying day in the park, life felt almost normal. Emily and I had settled into a rhythm after years of struggle. I'd adjusted to being a single father, not just in title, but in heart. My mornings revolved around getting her ready for school, her favorite cartoons playing in the background as I helped brush her hair into a side ponytail. She'd smile at me through the bathroom mirror, mischief in her eyes, then pretend to be a news anchor with her toothbrush. As a mic reporting live from the jungle that is Dad's closet, she'd say, with a dramatic tone that never failed to crack me up, despite the wheelchair, Emily was a firework, vibrant, independent, always eager to do things on her own. Her wheelchair, which we had customized with rainbow-colored spokes and a small solar-powered USB fan, was her freedom machine. She named it Zumi and talked to it like it was her pet. For her, it wasn't a limitation, it was a chariot. The neighborhood we lived in seemed like the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. Tree-lined sidewalks, weekly potlucks, retirees walking golden retrievers, the kind of suburb where kids left bikes on lawns and sprinklers became impromptu water parks. It felt safe. That is, until the HOA letters started appearing. At first, I dismissed them. One showed up in our mailbox, sealed in a neat cream envelope with the HOA logo stamped in blue. It was about unauthorized equipment visible on front property. I assumed they were talking about the wheelchair ramp I had installed outside our porch, a small one, just 3 feet with wooden railings. I thought maybe I needed a form or something, so I went to the next board meeting, my first, expecting to sort out. That was the first time I saw her up close. Karen. She sat in the center seat, her nameplate slightly tilted, fingers laced together, lips pursed like she was always tasting lemon. She didn't smile when I introduced myself, didn't even look up from the paper in front of her. I'm here to clear up a notice about my daughter's wheelchair ramp, I said politely. Karen raised one eyebrow and, without meeting my eyes, replied, "It's not the ramp. It's the mechanical modifications on her mobility device. Several residents have raised concerns." I blinked, confused. Her wheelchair? Call it what you like. It has blinking lights, wires. It whirs at night. There are optics. She said that last part like she was unveiling a national security threat. It took every ounce of self-control not to laugh. Was she serious? But something in her expression made my stomach churn. She meant it. From then on, Karen started watching us. Every time Emily wheeled herself down the sidewalk, Karen would be in her yard, trimming the same hedge, pretending to pull weeds that didn't exist. Emily noticed it too. "Why does the hedge lady look mad all the time?" she whispered to me once. I didn't want to alarm her, so I played it off. Maybe she needs a nap. But more notices came. More emails about non-compliant equipment and possible code violations. I started taking pictures, documenting everything. Not out of paranoia, but because something in Karen's tone hinted she wouldn't stop until she found a reason to escalate. Still, I never imagined just how far she'd go. Outside of that, life remained beautiful, at least for Emily. She loved going to the park and watching other kids play. Though she couldn't run, she could race anyone in Zumi and usually win. She liked feeding ducks near the pond, reading mystery books aloud, and pretending to solve wheelchair crimes. She had no idea that one was brewing right around her. If you had looked at us back then, a father and daughter laughing over ice cream, the afternoon sun dancing off her glittery chair, you would have seen joy. You would have seen peace. But peace, like silence before a storm, doesn't mean the skies are clear. It just means the wind hasn't hit yet. The first red flag didn't come with a bang. It came with a sticky note. We just returned from grocery shopping. Emily was humming Taylor Swift as I unloaded bags from the trunk. She wheeled herself up the ramp toward the front porch, only to pause. "Daddy," she said, pointing to the door. A bright pink sticky note fluttered slightly in a breeze, taped right beside our doorknob. It read, "Please store all mechanical equipment indoors after dark. It's disruptive and may raise suspicion." HOA, mechanical equipment? I scanned the porch. The only thing outside was Emily's wheelchair charger, a small, weather-protected unit plugged neatly into an outdoor socket. It was off, covered, and had been there for weeks without issue. I looked around and spotted her, Karen, standing at the corner of her lawn, arms crossed, pretending to prune an already bare rose bush. I called out politely, "Hi, was this from you?" She didn't answer right away, just stared, not at me, but at Emily's wheelchair. Then she raised her voice. "That charger light flashes all night. Someone called it in. Said it looked suspicious." I held back my irritation. "It's a mobility charger. For my daughter." Karen squinted. "Well, it's not just the lights. That wheelchair makes noises, worrying ones. Just letting you know the neighbors are starting to talk." I wanted to say, "Let them talk." But instead, I nodded, thanked her, and went inside, brushing it off as a misunderstanding. It wasn't. Over the next few days, strange things kept happening. Our trash can was moved from its spot by the curb twice. Emily's ramp had muddy footprints on it one morning, like someone had walked up and peered into our living room window. One afternoon, Emily whispered, "I saw the hedge lady pointing her phone at Zumi." She was probably just taking pictures of flowers, I told her. But even I didn't believe that. The next incident confirmed it. We were at the mailbox when Karen walked by, holding a clipboard like she was on patrol. She paused, then tilted her head toward Emily. "Is that a military-grade wheelchair?" I laughed, thinking she was joking. "What?" She didn't smile. "The cables underneath. The rotating wheels. That thing's got a motor and storage compartments. It doesn't look standard." "It's fully compliant," I said, trying to stay calm. "Everything was approved through our insurance and the manufacturer." Karen scribbled something on her clipboard. "What are you writing?" I asked. She looked up, stone-faced. "Just documenting equipment for neighborhood safety logs. You know, protocol." There was no protocol. The HOA didn't have a neighborhood safety log, at least not one any of the other neighbors had heard of, but Karen didn't need policies. She made her own. She started leaving emails. One morning, I found a printout on my windshield. It was an article from some conspiracy website about devices disguised as mobility tools. The caption she wrote on it? "You never know. Better safe than sorry." I wish I could say that was the moment I reported her, that I stood up and stopped it before it spiraled. But, like many parents just trying to keep things normal for their child, I told myself it would pass, that it was just Karen being overly cautious. I didn't want to escalate tension in a community we had just started to feel part of. But that was the mistake, because while I was playing it safe, Karen was preparing for war, and she believed my daughter's wheelchair was her battleground. The glares, the questions, the notes, they were never just Karen being a concerned neighbor. They were warnings, and I didn't take them seriously until the day she raised a gun at my little girl. It started with a letter, a formal one, stamped with the HOA's emblem. It was crisp, cream-colored, and resting neatly in our mailbox, addressed not just to me, but to the resident in violation. That was my first clue that something was wrong. Inside was a typed notice. "Multiple concerns have been raised regarding potentially unauthorized or hazardous mechanical devices present on your property. Specifically, your daughter's powered wheelchair appears to have suspicious modifications not compliant with community safety standards. The matter has been referred to appropriate parties for further review." I read it twice, then a third time. It felt surreal. Hazardous? Non-compliant? This was the same wheelchair Emily had used for over a year, customized with small accessories for her independence, a tray for books, some LED strips for visibility, a low-humming motor that helped her navigate curbs. It wasn't a tank. It was a mobility device for a child. My first instinct was to laugh, but the chill in my spine stopped me. I marched to the HOA office the next day. The receptionist glanced at the letter and hesitated before pointing me to the board chair's door. And there she was, Karen already waiting inside, a folder open in front of her like she was at a court hearing. She didn't look surprised to see me. "I'm here about this letter," I said firmly. "It's not only offensive, it's factually insane." Karen didn't even blink. "We're simply following up on a concern reported by several residents." "Several?" I narrowed my eyes. "Or one?" She ignored the jab and pushed the folder toward me. Inside were photographs, taken from a distance, clearly from a phone, likely hers. Shots of Emily's chair from the side, the back, even one of her rolling down the driveway. I felt sick. Karen pointed to one blurry image. "See that? That looks like a capacitor." I Googled the design. It matches military-grade hardware. "That's a battery pack," I said, "to help her go uphill. And that box underneath, it could house anything. It's a toolkit, with wrenches, for adjusting her brakes." Karen leaned back, unfazed. "We can't afford to take chances. Not in today's world." I stared at her, barely containing my anger. "You're accusing a disabled 8-year-old girl of terrorism?" She lifted her hands in mock innocence. "We're not making accusations, just passing information to the proper authorities." And that's when I realized what she meant. It wasn't just the HOA anymore. That evening, a police cruiser showed up outside her home. The officer was polite. Too polite, like he already knew how ridiculous this was. He introduced himself. said they had received an anonymous report of possible suspicious mechanical activity and that he was required to investigate. "I'm so sorry," he said when he saw Emily. "We're just following up on a tip." Emily looked up from her coloring book and smiled at him, completely unaware. She offered him a sticker from her page. The officer knelt beside her, checked the wheelchair briefly. No tools out, no battery malfunction, no hidden compartments. He stood up and shook his head. "Looks like a smart setup," he said kindly. "She's lucky to have a dad who takes care of her so well." But as he walked away, he paused. "Between us," he said, "we get these calls sometimes. People think they're helping. They're not." I thanked him. I closed the door. And then I sat down, completely drained. It wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was about the story someone was writing around her. Karen had created a narrative in her head, complete with fake evidence, blurry photos, and Google-fueled paranoia. And now that story had a paper trail. She was escalating, and I hadn't stopped her. I looked at Emily as she resumed coloring, humming to herself. She had no idea that someone thought she was dangerous. No idea that the community meant to protect her was quietly preparing to turn against her. At first, I thought she'd stop after the police visit. That maybe a trained officer seeing my daughter's wheelchair up close, giving it a clean report, would force Karen to face reality. But I was wrong. Karen didn't feel embarrassed. She felt validated. The very next day, I saw her standing across the street, phone raised, recording Emily as we backed out of the driveway. She didn't hide it. No shame, just cold, mechanical observation, like she was documenting a wildlife sighting. "Why is she filming me again?" Emily asked, her voice soft, nervous. "She's just being nosy." I lied. "Ignore her." But it was getting harder to ignore. Karen had stopped pretending. She began shadowing us when we walked to the park. Sometimes she'd appear suddenly from behind a tree. Other times she'd follow on foot at a distance, camera zoomed in on the wheelchair. One afternoon, Emily asked if we could take the long way home through the alley behind the community pool. "Why?" I asked. "She always watches me on the main street," she replied. "I don't like it." My heart broke. It wasn't just that Karen was paranoid, it was that her obsession was now stealing my daughter's sense of safety. And mine. I finally filed a complaint with the HOA board, attaching a full-page letter with time-stamped photos I'd taken of Karen filming, following, and lingering near our yard. I expected them to take action. They didn't. A week passed with no reply. Then an HOA community liaison dropped off a generic letter at my door. "Thank you for your feedback. We take all concerns seriously and encourage open dialogue between neighbors. The HOA does not mediate personal disputes unless they violate specific community regulations." Personal dispute? This wasn't a spat over property lines. This was surveillance, harassment, targeting a disabled child. Still, I tried to keep things civil for Emily's sake. But Karen kept pushing. She started talking to other neighbors, whispering in grocery lines, pulling people aside after HOA meetings. I overheard one conversation at the park when I doubled back for Emily's water bottle. A woman was asking Karen, "Are you sure it's something serious?" Karen nodded, eyes wide. "I've read the articles. There are plans online. Devices disguised as mobility aids. They plant them in neighborhoods. You never know. That chair hums and flashes. It's not right." The woman looked uncomfortable, but she's just a little girl. Karen didn't flinch. That's what makes it the perfect cover. I stood frozen behind a tree, heart pounding. She really believed it. Or maybe worse, she didn't, but she wanted everyone else to. Later that night, I found small scratches on the side of Emily's wheelchair. Tiny but fresh. I asked her if she'd bumped into anything. "No," she said quietly. "But I saw the hedge lady really close to it yesterday. She said she was just looking." I was done playing polite. I showed up at the next HOA meeting with printouts of everything, timestamps, video stills, even a clip from our doorbell camera showing Karen circling our porch at 9 p.m. with a flashlight. When I finished presenting, I looked around the room, expecting support. Silence. Karen sat in the front row, unbothered. Then she raised her hand. I was conducting a citizen inspection, she said calmly. We have the right to protect our community. Protect it from what? A child in a wheelchair? I realized then that the board wouldn't help. Karen was a fixture, not just of the HOA, but of its power structure. Her fear had become policy. Her delusion had been normalized. She was no longer just watching. She was building a case, and I had no idea what came next. But I knew this. She wouldn't stop until something terrible happened, and she'd already chosen her target. It was supposed to be a good day. Emily had just finished her physical therapy milestone. Her therapist said she was developing stronger control with her upper body, and she was proud of it. So we celebrated the way we always did, a trip to Maple Grove Park, her favorite place in the world. She called it Zumi's Racetrack. That morning, she picked her own outfit, a lavender hoodie with cartooned ducks on it and sparkly sneakers that she insisted on wearing even though she didn't walk in them. She clipped her little stuffed koala to the armrest of her wheelchair, and we packed juice boxes, crackers, and her favorite book into the side pouch. I remember her saying, "It's a good day, Daddy. Nothing bad will happen today." I wish I'd believed her. We rolled down the sidewalk, past the same houses, same gardens, same flags. I noticed Karen's car wasn't in her driveway. A flicker of relief passed through me. At the park, the sun was warm and the grass shimmered with dew. Emily raced down the pathway, giggling as I walked behind, recording her on my phone. A perfect moment. I paused for just a second to grab her dropped scarf from the bench. She rolled ahead toward the duck pond, maybe 20-30 feet. That's when I heard it. A woman screaming, "Get away from that! Step back! Drop your hands!" I turned. Karen, running toward Emily, her face twisted with fear and rage, one hand shaking, the other reaching inside her oversized beige purse. My stomach dropped. She pulled it out, a black pistol, small but real. Her fingers were clumsy around the grip, but she held it outstretched, aiming directly at my daughter. "Don't move," she shrieked. "You're not fooling anyone. I know what that is. That chair is a bomb." Emily froze. Her smile collapsed into confusion, then terror. She raised her hands in the air, a gesture she must have seen on TV, trembling, eyes wide, lips parted. "Daddy, what's happening?" I dropped everything and sprinted. The world narrowed. All I saw was Karen, her knuckles white, the gun shaking, and my little girl caught in the crosshairs. "Karen, put that down." I screamed. She didn't. "She's just a child. That's a wheelchair." But she was too far gone, too deep in her paranoia. I saw the wires. I saw them. She was fiddling with something. It's a detonator. She's playing innocent. Emily's lips trembled. Tears welled up and rolled down her cheeks. I didn't do anything. Her voice was barely a whisper. I was just feeding the ducks. People were gathering. A jogger stopped. A couple with a stroller froze in disbelief. A man pulled out his phone and shouted, "Call the cops! She's got a gun on a kid." Still, Karen didn't lower the weapon. "She's tricking you all. That thing's gonna explode. Look at the parts." I saw the blueprints online. My body blocked her line of sight as I stepped in front of Emily, arms wide, legs shaking. Every part of me screamed to tackle her, but I couldn't risk her firing by reflex. "Do it then," I hissed. "If you really think my daughter is a threat, then shoot me first. But you're going to have to live with that forever." A few long, heavy seconds passed. Then sirens. 2 patrol cars screeched to a halt at the curb. Officers rushed out, guns drawn. They didn't know what was happening, only what dispatch had reported. "Armed woman threatening child at Maple Grove." "Drop the weapon," one of the officers roared. Karen finally dropped it, slowly, as if waking from a trance. She stumbled back and sobbed. "You don't understand. I was trying to save the neighborhood. That thing is too sophisticated." The officers cuffed her gently, guiding her to the cruiser. She kept muttering, "I'm not the villain. I'm not the villain." Emily sobbed uncontrollably. Her tiny hands clutched my shirt like her life depended on it. I held her, rocking back and forth on the cold grass, whispering, "You're okay. You're okay." I've got you. But deep down, I knew neither of us would ever be truly okay again. The sirens were deafening. Blue and red lights flashed against the park's trees, painting the grass with chaos. Karen stood rigid, hands in the air now, but not out of remorse, out of confusion, like she didn't understand why she was being treated as the threat. Two officers approached her cautiously, guns drawn but low. One shouted, "Ma'am, step back and drop the weapon. Now." Karen obeyed, slowly, reluctantly, setting her handgun on the ground like it was precious. "You don't get it," she said, her voice cracked and righteous. "I was protecting the neighborhood. That girl has a modified device, wires, boxes. She was preparing to detonate it. You're arresting the wrong person." The lead officer cuffed her without a word. Meanwhile, another officer came running toward me and Emily. I was still kneeling, holding her against my chest. She trembled uncontrollably, her tears soaking into my hoodie, her hands clenched into my back like claws. "Sir, is she injured? Are you okay?" the officer asked. I looked up at him. "She's not hurt physically, but she's traumatized. That woman aimed a gun at my daughter because she thought her wheelchair was a bomb." The officer blinked, unsure if he heard right. "She's 8 years old." I added, barely holding back my rage. "She has spina bifida. That device is her wheelchair." The officer stepped aside to let a paramedic come through. Emily refused to let go of me, so they just knelt beside us and checked her pulse where she clung to my chest. Another officer approached with a notepad. "We're going to need to take statements," he said, gently. "Do you have documentation for your daughter's condition? About the equipment?" I nodded, reaching into the front pouch of Emily's wheelchair bag and pulling out the medical file I always kept, a small folder with her diagnosis, insurance approvals, and equipment clearance forms. I handed it to him. He flipped through the papers. "This is more than enough." "I'm sorry, sir. This should have never happened." I looked at Emily, who still hadn't spoken. She stared at the grass, glassy-eyed, hugging her koala tighter than ever. Across the park, Karen sat on the back of a police cruiser, still ranting. "You people don't get it. I saw blueprints online. They disguise these things now. It was too quiet. That's not normal." And it had a blinking light. One of the officers turned to her. "It was a battery-level indicator, ma'am." "I was only trying to save lives," she snapped, as if she were the protagonist of some imagined war film. "I read the forums. They warned us about devices like this." The crowd had grown. Neighbors stood at the edge of the yellow tape, murmuring, filming with their phones. I saw one woman clutching her son close. Another whispered to her husband, "Isn't that the girl with the decorated chair? She's so sweet." But even with Karen in handcuffs, the damage had been done. An officer returned to me. "We've taken her into custody for brandishing a weapon and making a false report. Depending on how the DA proceeds, there may be further charges." I nodded, still numb. "And the HOA? Will they finally do something?" The officer hesitated. "That'll be up to your legal team." Karen was still talking as they closed the car door on her. "You're all going to regret this. One day, you'll thank me for being the only one who saw the truth." The car pulled away. The officer standing beside me took off his cap and sighed. "I've seen a lot in my time, sir, but I've never seen someone aim a weapon at a child and still think they were the hero." Emily finally spoke. Just one word, barely audible. "Why?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was hold her tighter and promise, quietly, she'll never come near you again. But in my heart, I knew this wasn't over. Not really, because while Karen was gone for now, the system that allowed her to get that close, it was still standing. The park used to be Emily's favorite place in the world. After the incident, she wouldn't even look at it. Every time we drove past Maple Grove, she'd turn her head away and go silent. The girl who used to cheer at the sight of ducks now flinched at the sound of rustling leaves. At night, she stopped sleeping in her own bed and began insisting on sleeping next to me, clinging to my arm like it was her lifeline. She didn't talk about it, not directly, but it haunted everything. She stopped calling her wheelchair Zumi. She didn't want to decorate it anymore. The LEDs, once a source of pride, were torn off in silence one evening. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just quietly peeled away the things that once made her feel free. The hardest part wasn't what she said. It was the silence. I tried to explain what happened in the gentlest way I could. Some people don't understand things they haven't seen before. I told her. And sometimes they get scared and do terrible things. But I didn't do anything, she said one night, her voice barely above a whisper. I was just there. That's what broke me. She was right. She had just been there, existing, living, playing, and that was enough for someone to label her dangerous. The house, once our sanctuary, now felt exposed. I checked the doors 3 times before bed. I installed extra cameras around the porch. I started keeping a log, documenting every incident, every glance, every time a neighbor lingered too long. It wasn't just about Karen anymore. It was about the sense of vulnerability that had crept into our lives and refused to leave. People in the neighborhood were split. Some reached out with cards and apologies, saying things like, "We never agreed with Karen," or "We're so sorry your daughter went through that." But others stayed quiet, too quiet. The ones who had once waved casually now avoided eye contact. The families who had stood shoulder to shoulder at HOA cookouts suddenly weren't sure where they stood anymore. The HOA sent a short apology letter. It was cold, templated. They offered no accountability, no direct statement against Karen's behavior, just a vague mention of committed to inclusive community standards. It felt like salt in the wound. I hired an attorney, not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew if I didn't fight back, someone like Karen would do this again. Maybe not to Emily, maybe not in our neighborhood, but somewhere. This wasn't just about personal trauma. It was about a system that empowered people like her, people who thought fear gave them the right to act like judge, jury, and executioner. Emily's therapist said recovery would take time. That trauma doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers for years before we even notice its echo. In the quiet moments when she holds my hand tighter than she used to, or stares too long at strangers walking by, I hear that whisper. And I promise myself she will not grow up believing that the world is afraid of her. They will know she was the brave one. I didn't want to go to court. I didn't want headlines, depositions, or interviews. All I wanted was for my daughter to feel safe again. But that wasn't going to happen, not unless I made sure that what happened at the park didn't disappear quietly under the weight of HOA silence and suburban denial. So I hired a lawyer. He was sharp, calm, and laser-focused. He listened carefully as I laid out everything, from the first sticky note on our door to the moment Karen aimed a loaded gun at my daughter's chest. I handed over printed photographs, saved emails, video clips from our doorbell cam, and even Emily's medical records. By the end of our meeting, he looked at me and said, "This isn't just harassment. It's civil rights abuse, and possibly criminal negligence on the HOA's part." I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. When the lawsuit was filed, the HOA's response was as cold as ever: denial. They claimed the board had no official knowledge of Karen's behavior prior to the incident, that all interactions had been within community guidelines, that they had never sanctioned any form of surveillance, confrontation, or report against Emily's wheelchair. It was a lie. I had receipts, literally, emails, signatures, complaint letters on HOA letterhead, but they were trying to wash their hands clean, pretend it never happened. Worse yet, they tried to paint Karen as a concerned resident acting independently. But Karen didn't back down either. She released a public statement through her own attorney, doubling down on her belief that she had reason to believe the child's equipment posed an imminent threat. She claimed she was following citizen vigilance principles and cited vague references to online conspiracy forums as her sources. The media picked it up. What started as a local story turned into a nationwide headline within days. HOA member holds disabled child at gunpoint, claims wheelchair was a bomb. Talk shows debated it. Activists tweeted about it. Civil rights organizations called it a case study in fear-fueled discrimination. News vans started parking down the street from our house. I did one interview, just one, where I spoke calmly but firmly. My daughter wasn't a threat. Her wheelchair isn't a weapon. The real danger is a system that let this happen in the first place. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. Cards arrived from across the country. Parents of disabled children sent messages telling me they had faced similar fear and isolation. One mother wrote, "Your story is our story. You're fighting for all of us." But with that support came pushback. Anonymous emails, HOA sympathizers saying I was ruining someone's life over a misunderstanding. Karen's defenders started calling her misguided, not malicious. Misguided? She pointed a gun at an 8-year-old child. As court proceedings began, Emily had to give a statement through a child advocate. It was the hardest part. I watched her sit quietly with her hands folded, voice low and broken, as she described what she remembered of that day. When she finished, she asked the advocate, "Will the hedge lady come back?" It nearly broke me, but I had to be strong for her and for every other family that's ever been silenced by a system that protects fear over justice. The wheels of the legal system had started to turn, and this time they were going to roll over every lie that tried to bury the truth. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature, in spirit. Karen sat at the defense table, wearing a navy blazer and her signature scowl. Her attorney whispered something in her ear, but she didn't nod. She just stared straight ahead, expression stiff, lips pursed, as if this whole thing was just a waste of her precious time. But this time, she wasn't the one in control. And the truth, her truth, was about to unravel. The judge, a tall woman with steel gray hair and reading glasses that made her voice carry like thunder, opened the day's proceedings with a statement that instantly shifted the mood. Before we begin testimonies, the court has received a prior report from a neighboring county regarding the defendant, Karen M. Halberd. This report involves an incident that occurred 3 years ago involving another minor with a medical condition. The record has been deemed admissible. My heart stopped. I glanced at my attorney, who gave me a sharp, knowing nod. We didn't know this was coming. The prosecutor rose and began reading from the record. On May 12, 2019, Ms. Halberd filed a report against a 10-year-old boy playing in his front yard with a medical infusion pump. Ms. Halberd claimed the boy was testing a chemical weapon system. Law enforcement investigated. The pump was medically prescribed for cystic fibrosis. No charges were filed, but Ms. Halberd was warned by police for harassment. A stunned silence swept the room. Karen looked rattled now. She leaned into her attorney, whispering quickly, hands clenching her notepad until it wrinkled. The prosecutor continued, "This establishes a clear pattern of behavior, profiling disabled children, interpreting assistive medical devices as threats, and escalating through false reports and dangerous action." Then it was my turn. I stood. My palms were sweaty, my heart pounding, but my voice didn't shake. "I'm not here today for revenge," I said. "I'm here because my daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, was nearly killed over a flashlight on her wheelchair. Because a woman thought lights and wires meant bombs and terrorism. Because fear was louder than reason." I looked toward Karen, who wouldn't meet my eyes. My daughter has been afraid to go outside, afraid to ride her chair, afraid of being seen. And it's not just her. Karen's actions have echoed far beyond one park on one afternoon. She has made our entire community feel unsafe. Then I turned to the judge. She did this before. She's been warned before. But she wasn't stopped. And if nothing changes, she'll do it again. Murmurs spread in the gallery. A few people shook their heads in disbelief. One woman wiped her eyes. A man near the back leaned forward, lips pressed tight. You could feel it, the shift. The veil had been lifted. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern, a willful, dangerous obsession with control. And for the second time, a child had paid the price. The defense tried to spin it. Karen's lawyer claimed she had heightened community awareness and a passion for safety. But the judge wasn't buying it. Her closing remarks were firm. Karen Halberd's actions were not protective. They were paranoid, not vigilant but violent. And what makes them most dangerous is the calm confidence with which she carried them out. This court recognizes not just the trauma inflicted on a child, but the systems that failed to prevent it. Those systems will now be held accountable. Karen didn't look so confident anymore. Her eyes were down. Her hands no longer gripped the paper, they trembled in her lap. And as the gavel fell, I reached down and held Emily's hand. Because for the first time in a long time, justice didn't feel like an illusion. It felt real, and it had a sound. Bang. Karen was fined and placed under a restraining order that prohibited her from coming within 500 feet of Emily or any child using medical assistive devices. The court mandated a psychiatric evaluation and community service, and while some argued the punishment wasn't harsh enough, it wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about closure. The HOA wasn't spared either. Under pressure from legal action and intense media scrutiny, they were forced to issue a public apology. A statement was sent out to every household in the community, admitting negligence, acknowledging Emily by name, and condemning Karen's actions as unacceptable. For the first time, they were accountable, not just on paper, but publicly. The board president resigned shortly after. But we didn't stay. Not out of fear, we were done being afraid, but because the place no longer felt like home. It was the place where my daughter was once treated like a threat. We needed a fresh start. We moved to a nearby town, to a quieter neighborhood without an HOA, where kids played freely and wheelchairs weren't stared at like suspicious devices. Emily got a new wheelchair. She chose the design herself, teal blue, with starlight decals and soft glow wheels that pulsed when she moved. At first, she was hesitant. She asked me, "Are people going to think this one's dangerous too?" I knelt beside her and said, "No, sweetheart. People are going to think it's amazing, just like you." It took time. Healing isn't linear. There were still nightmares, still moments when loud voices made her flinch, still walks where she looked over her shoulder. But slowly, gently, the light came back. She started drawing again. She laughed more. She renamed her new chair Blazer and challenged me to sidewalk races. And she won. Every time. One morning, months after the trial, she looked at me while we were having breakfast and asked, "Do you think I'm brave?" I smiled, braver than most grown-ups I know. She nodded, quietly proud, and went back to eating her cereal. No drama, no fanfare, just a small moment of peace, the kind you stop taking for granted after the storm. We never forgot what happened, but we refused to let it define us, because in the end, Karen's fear couldn't break Emily's spirit, and no amount of hate will ever overpower the quiet strength of a child who just wants to live, laugh, and ride her wheelchair in the sun. Speak directly to the camera. Calm, steady, but with purpose in your voice. Disability doesn't make anyone dangerous, but ignorance can be deadly. My daughter didn't threaten anyone. She didn't break any laws. She didn't do anything wrong. She was simply a child, living, laughing, moving through the world in a wheelchair. And yet, in one terrifying moment, that chair, her symbol of freedom, was turned into a weapon in someone else's mind. This story isn't just about one woman named Karen. It's about a culture that lets fear override facts. It's about communities that turn their backs when things get uncomfortable. It's about systems that protect power instead of people. If you're watching this and you've ever felt unsafe in your own neighborhood, if you or someone you love has been judged for how they look, how they move, or what equipment they rely on to survive, then you already know this story could have been yours. But it doesn't have to happen again. Let's start calling this what it is: ableism, negligence, and a complete failure to protect the most vulnerable among us. Share this story if you believe no child should have to fear the people who claim to be protecting the community. Talk to your neighbors. Challenge your HOA. Educate those around you. And if you've lived through something similar, don't stay silent. Your voice is powerful. Your truth matters. You're not alone. White heavy checkmark, like, comment, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Bell subscribe to HOA Denied Access for more real-life stories that expose HOA abuse, systemic failure, and the people who fight back. Envelope got a story like this? Drop it in the comments or email us. We're here to tell the stories others are too afraid to. Because when you shine a light on injustice, you don't just expose it, you end it.